to another episode of Evolve the Earth Talk Show Podcast. Today we explore the big questions, deep ideas, and the philosophies that shape our world. Today we're honored to be joined by a tenured professor of philosophy, religious studies, and humanities at Chabot, who has a Ph.D. in philosophy from UC Santa Cruz and a teaching career spanning over a decade. I would like to welcome Dr. Ryan Scherbart. What is philosophy and how did you get into it?
In short, philosophy, it's the love of wisdom. If you break down the etymology of the word, that's what you end up with. Today, the way I talk about it in my classes, it's less a body of knowledge and more something that you do. It's thinking. It's thinking critically. It's thinking systematically. It's thinking carefully. It's thinking critically about big issues, fundamental questions, not so much the small, everyday, mundane stuff. The questions about morality, about reality, about existence, about knowledge, about truth and logic. 25 years ago, almost to the month, I walked into my first philosophy class. So I was a student at UC Santa Barbara.
Right.
It was fall quarter, and it was an intro to ethics class.
Okay.
And guess which class I just walked out of about 15 minutes ago? It was an intro to ethics class. How cool is it to be on the other side of the classroom? So that class turned into a second one, a third one. Eventually, I majored in it. I double majored in that and psychology. And then right out of undergrad, I went to San Diego State for a master's program. And after that, I was lucky enough to be hired at a lot of the local Bay Area community colleges and was teaching part-time. Then went back to school again in Santa Cruz. You mentioned UC Santa Cruz. So that's where I did my doctorate. And then 2015, now 10 years ago, which again is time, it's going by fast. That's when I was lucky enough, Chabot hired me full-time, tenured, like you said, and it's been great ever since.
Your research includes free will and metaphysics. How do you approach the debate between determinism and libertarian free will?
We're physical beings, or at least physical in part. Since the time of the Enlightenment, scientists like Sir Isaac Newton, scientists discovered these natural laws, these physical laws that seem to govern in totality the behavior of physical things. So we are also physical, at least our body is. If you combine these laws plus the past, like prior conditions, the view of determinism is telling us that we are locked into one unique future that is sort of inescapable, which is kind of scary if you're a human being, thinking that you have free will. So that's the problem of determinism in a nutshell. There's lots of potential solutions to that. One of them is to say, well, okay, we have this physical body, but we also are different than tables and rocks and chairs and trees. We have maybe a soul. We have consciousness, hopefully.
Hopefully.
That might be the source of our free will. So maybe we're categorically different from billiard balls or dominoes. So that's the libertarian perspective. It's hard to prove consciousness, hard to prove a soul. And so the other view that is also probably even more popular is called compatibilism. And that's the view where we embrace determinism. We try to have our cake and eat it too. The compatibilists, their claim is that even if we are locked in this deterministic way into one unique future, there's still room for freedom. And it'll be under the conditions that you might expect when there's not external or internal forces like coercion, like there's no gun to your back, or I'm not psychologically compelled to do something. If you remove those constraints, then there's room for free will.
How does contemporary neuroscience challenge or support traditional philosophical perspectives on free will?
So I was talking about this in my ethics class recently. In the 1980s, 1983, I think, there was this psychologist named Benjamin Libet, and he did this experiment where he was measuring brain activity leading up to an intentional action. And so he had the participants of an experiment hold up their hands and just flick their wrists. And we could do it right now. Flick your right or your left wrist at will. Whenever you want.
Okay.
And so imagine we have electrodes hooked up to your brain. They were measuring what's called the readiness potential. That's the non or unconscious brain activity leading up to an intentional action. And what they discovered was shocking. It was half a second, like 500 milliseconds before you decide left or right, the scientists could tell what you were going to do.
Interesting.
So it's unclear who's in charge, who's running the show. Is it you, your consciousness, your soul, or is it some part of you that is acting before your awareness that's really in control?
That's very interesting.
Quite frightening. And so to fully answer your question, cognitive science, we'll be able to put into practice the things that philosophers talk about theoretically.
Right.
And we learn from each other.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. A side note on that, I did see that they have those neuro chips in their head that they can like read stuff, and they said the guy could actually, it was like the signals before they knew about it, and it was reading it, so that's pretty interesting to hear about.
The Neuralink.
Neuralink, that's what it's called, sorry about that. Yeah, it's Neuralink.
Which is cool because that can help people with all sorts of issues, you know, if they had some kind of physical disability. Yeah, I mean, how magical would that be, you know, after living your whole life and not being able to do something and then you can.
The guy that happened to him, he could actually play video games, and before he was shooting, he said that his mind was reading it before he even thought about it.
That's
what you were saying.
Yeah, that seems to be the finding.
Yeah, that's interesting. What ethical framework do you find most compelling for addressing modern moral dilemmas such as AI decision-making or environmental responsibility?
There's two historically relevant, still to this day, competing views that are really popular that you would discuss in like an intro to ethics class that I mentioned. One focuses on good consequences, that's utilitarianism, and the other one focuses on rights and respecting people's dignity and autonomy. So that's what's called a Kantian framework, or here's the big word, a deontological.
Wow, we're in college.
We love our big words in philosophy. I think you could make a pretty strong utilitarian case in the AI case and the environmental case for how to proceed. So essentially you're doing a cost-benefit analysis, but instead of doing it with money or with finances, you're doing it with morality. So you're weighing the good versus the bad. And what's cool about utilitarianism is you don't just factor in yourself, you have to factor in everyone and anyone who's being impacted by your behavior, and this includes other animals because they're sentient. So if they're the deontological framework, that could come in handy if there are any rights abuse issues that come up with the AI or the environmental issues, which I'm sure they would, then that one would probably be more powerful because it focuses so much on rights and the dignity of respecting persons.
The AI is just another level.
Scary.
Given your background in both philosophy and psychology, how do you see the relationship between cognitive science and traditional theories of mind?
Well, let me answer your question with a question. Have you seen Severance or heard of it?
I've heard of it, yes.
Yeah, so it's a show that's exploding. I think someone said it's the most popular television show of all time on some metrics.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so for people out there who have heard of the show, are innies and outies the same person? So in the show, there's like a work person, that's the innie, and then they go home, and that's their outie.
Okay.
It's the same body, it's the same person, but they are severed, and so the person at work, they have no memory of being at home.
Wow, and
vice
this is in the show?
This is in the show.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I recommend. Yeah, a lot of philosophy and science fiction in it. Cognitive science, talking about the Neuralink, might be able to do this in the near future. And so what's the interplay between the sciences, specifically cognitive neuroscience, and philosophy is the science fiction that we dream of, going back to Star Trek, to what we can do now, like that Libet experiment, is putting into practice things that philosophers have only dreamt of. So we can see how our theories actually play out in the real world thanks to these advances in sciences.
Welcome to the future.
Yeah, we are here.
We're here. Symbolic logic plays a crucial role in modern philosophy. How do you approach teaching logic in a way that is accessible yet rigorous for students?
That's our Philosophy 55 class. It's called Symbolic Logic. The rigor is there. There's no problem with the rigor. So the issue is with the accessibility. So I'm actually doing this class right now, and we're in the part of the class where the problem sets that we're doing, the logical techniques that we're learning, they start to have a little bit of a Sudoku or a crossword puzzle vibe. That works for students who are struggling, because if you're struggling, but you're kind of having fun playing a game, you're gonna keep paying attention and you're gonna stay engaged. So that's my solution to the accessibility problem, is make something that might feel a little overly mathy and formal and make it something that, this is a cliche, but make it fun.
How do you think epistemology should adapt to an era of rapid information, dissemination, and misinformation?
Epistemology, it's so more fancy philosophical jargon. It's really about knowledge.
Okay.
Philosophical study of knowledge. And you look at issues like justifying beliefs, so that's important. We believe all sorts of things. We would like to think that most, if not all, the things we believe are things we know that are actually true. Sadly, that's not the case. If you study epistemology, in theory, you're gonna get better at knowing when your beliefs are justified. You're gonna be better at combating the cognitive biases and the motivated reasoning and the rationalization that we all find ourselves guilty of. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
Let's say that so I'm making this up, this isn't true, but let's say tomorrow there was a study that found that coffee drinkers, especially big coffee drinkers, live longer than non-coffee drinkers. So coffee drinkers would be so stoked on
For
that,
sure.
right?
They're probably doing extra.
But you're being, I want to give me more. But if you're being epistemologically or epistemically honest, what you need to do is not just accept that at face value. You like that because that confirms something you already do, but you should continually look for disconfirmation. So what we have a tendency not to do, so you read that and you just accept it because that's good for you. But what we have a tendency not to do is, let me fact check this, let me double check it, let me look for potential disconfirmation. This is what you have to do in the sciences. That's one of the benefits in theory. I mean, if you take a epistemology class.
Your work includes social and political philosophy. What do you think is the most pressing philosophical question in contemporary political discourse?
Because this has been an issue with the change in administration federally, and it's even impacted us here more locally at Chabot. And it's some of the DEI stuff, right? So diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has this political element to it. Yeah, the equity question is such a big one for me. So in a word, it's fairness. And who would be against equity? Or who doesn't want more fairness? Let's keep things as fair
as possible
as they can be. But then you have different definitions of fairness, right? Some politicians will talk about, we want wealthy people to pay their fair share when it comes to taxes. Well, to them, they say it's fair. The people that are, have a high tax bracket, their definition of fair might be different. Even here for our students, if you have a documented diagnosed learning disability, I think it's federal law, ADA policy or law, that you are entitled to potentially be in a quiet room to get time and a half. That's where equality and equity sometimes come apart. So in a sense, that's not equal because someone might have more time on an exam than someone else. But the claim is that even though it's not equal, it's equitable. It's fair. The diversity end, that's another one where who wouldn't be for more diversity? But there has been some research that on one metric, diversity has actually decreased in some universities. And it's not what you might think. When people, they think diversity and they think of different backgrounds, ethnicity or race or religion. At some of the universities, there's been a noticeable decrease in viewpoint diversity. They've been measuring this over the last 20 or 30 years, and the ratio of kind of different perspectives on things has gone a little bit lopsided. And that has impacted, these social scientists, they argue that has impacted the research, because if people are too one-sided or too like-minded, you don't get as much of that. I'm going back to the institutional disconfirmation. You need a little bit of an adversarial kind of, I see things from a different perspective. You need that back and forth. That's really the way that science progresses and research progresses. The political issue that I think is so salient these days, in addition to the equity question, is the diversity one, because there's different sorts of diversity, and we kind of forget that.
You teach courses in Taoist and Buddhist philosophy. How do these traditions challenge or complement Western metaphysical and ethical theories?
I was talking about Taoism just a half an hour ago.
Okay. Taoism.
I think there are a lot of differences. One that a lot of theologians point out is that the main problem in a lot of the so-called Eastern traditions is ignorance, whereas the main problem for a lot of the so-called Western traditions, like Christianity, for example, is sinfulness. So ignorance versus sinfulness. One of the truths that was revealed by the Buddha, he revealed these four noble truths. The first one is that suffering is inescapable. We all suffer. It's ubiquitous. I think where you can see some compatibility, what might we say, some interplay between the East and the West is if you look from a Western framework, from say a Christian framework, they speak to the problem of suffering. We all are dealt a hand in life, and it's not dealt fairly, unfortunately. It kind of goes back to the equity issue. And so some people are going to suffer more than others. The Western tradition has a potential solution to that problem, which is resilience. Which is even if life throws suffering at you, you have power and capability to get through it. I mean, that's the image of the Passion or the Christ figure, which is like, here's the role model. Someone who suffered as much as you could suffer and still was able to overcome that, right? So that's the promise of new life in the Christian tradition.
Many Western philosophers struggle with the non-dualistic perspectives of Eastern Eastern traditions. How do you guide students in engaging with these world views meaningfully?
It's interesting you bring up non-dualism and dualism. In Taoism. It's actually, dualism is an essential part of that tradition. So you've heard of the yin-yang or yin-yang? That is the epitome of a dualistic concept. So there is dualism in the Eastern traditions, but where you find the non-dualism issue, it's more in Hinduism or in Buddhism, where there's a rejection of the model of there's me and my subjective experience, kind of the ego, the I, and then there's you and the outside world. Speaking of subseverance and the inners and the outies, the innie is your ego, yourself, the I, the subjective, and then the world, the outer. This is the traditional view that these non-dualists being critical of. The outer is the subjective objective. That's the object. They call it the subject-object distinction, and that's what's being called into question by some of these Hindu and Buddhist philosophers. And let me give you an example to make that clear. Think about where we get so trapped by our own ego that it distorts our perception of reality.
Okay.
Think back to junior high school.
Yeah, younger days, for sure.
Younger days, you know, it's one of your first romantic relationships and you get dumped.
Aw.
And in that moment, in that day, it's the end of the world. You know, imagine like, you know, a teenager coming home with their parents and they run upstairs, they slam the door. Like, Crony, so-and-so dumped me. In that moment, it really feels.
It feels like
the sun is never going to shine again.
Nothing's
they're never going to feel any joy.
Yeah.
That is a classic example of ego and the inner perspective gone haywire. It's a reminder that it's not always how it seems. I mentioned that the main problem in these traditions is ignorance. We don't realize that our perspective very much is what we're used to is kind of filtered.
Okay.
And so if you can get in touch with that more unfiltered or unconditioned reality, that's the path to enlightenment and truth.
Enlightenment and truth. I love it. What role should philosophy play in fostering inner religious and inner cultural understanding?
I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about the turmoil in the Middle East, actually. So that's as bad as it was decades ago. And I thought if you could combine philosophers and some of my colleagues from other disciplines, you know, off the top of my head, maybe like communication studies. That would be a deadly combo to be like a mediator for peace talks between different sides. I think that could be a powerful combination. The philosophers, they're really good at making sure people aren't talking past each other, making sure that we're clear on our terms, making sure that we're understanding. And the people in comm, this is their expertise as well. Together we could help both parties avoid the rhetoric and the emotional ploys and some of the fallacious thinking. That would be a good career. So if you're a philosophy major, do the peace talks in the Middle East. That would be a decent job for you.
How do you see online education shaping the future of philosophical discourse and instruction?
Pre-COVID.
Sure.
Online classes were huge. And then COVID happened, and then it went from huge to everything. We were trying to figure out what's going to happen post-COVID. Are students going to want to go back to pre-COVID levels in terms of their demand for online instruction? And there still is a super high demand for online. I think it's a good thing, and so I try to keep the human element in an online class as much as I can, and it's difficult at times. How do you get that interaction, especially if it's have you heard of asynchronous versus synchronous? So an online class where, you know, if you were over Zoom, it's online, but you're still all there at the same time, synchronously. But then there's online classes where people are learning at different times. You know, I post a video, you watch it a day or two later. You ask a question, and then another student or I address it minutes or a week later, a day later. So it's a challenge to keep that interaction as close as it can be to a normal in-person class. What I've been doing is, even in my asynchronous classes, I will still try to hold a live Zoom class or lecture where it's optional, you know, because people aren't required to be available at a specific time. And so the people that can make it, you know, they join, and then that's recorded. Even if you weren't there in person, at least if you're watching human interaction, you're gonna kind of vicariously, I think, experience that. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things I've been doing.
Philosophy is often seen as best learned through dialogue. What strategies do you use to maintain this engagement in an online learning environment?
The go-to tool for interaction, which I think needs an upgrade, is discussions or discussion boards, like Canvas. Use Canvas discussion. I have been racking my brain. I think that there's an issue, there's a problem with the discussions because they're great to a certain extent, and they do the job at a basic level of the interaction, you know, student to student and students to me and vice versa.
Yeah.
I can tell that for many students, they're kind of just going through the motions. It gets a little bit tedious. A lot of them, they're asking a question, not so much because they actually are confused about something, but just because it's mandatory, it's a requirement.
Gotcha.
You know, the classic prompt on a discussion is ask one question and respond to 2 students or something like that. I've been trying to get creative about this, and this is an experiment. I'll let you know next time when we do a follow-up interview.
Yeah.
I'm having students rank their questions on how pressing they are and how much they want me to address them in the next live Zoom lecture that's recorded. And then the second thing I'm doing is, if they don't really have a question, if they're not really confused, then just tell me something unique about yourself. Send me a YouTube link or a Spotify link with a song that you just found. Or tell me about a show, something like a Severance that you've gotten into recently, and then I will share that with the rest of the class, you know, kind of like at the halfway point, just as a mental break.
Okay.
So then we learn something about the person that I didn't know before. I connect with them.
Yeah.
The students are connected with each other. It's a nice little mental break, especially if it's something rigorous like the Philosophy 55 symbolic logic stuff. So that's been my experiment. I'm also being exposed to all sorts of songs and artists and TV shows that I had never heard of. So that's fun too.
With the rise of AI-generated content, how should educators balance the use of technology with traditional philosophical methods of critical thinking and argumentation?
The AI stuff, it is a huge problem. If you go to faculty meetings, division meetings, administrative meetings, meetings at the state level, they are going to be talking about AI, artificial intelligence. It is the issue of our time. It's become a bit of a headache because so many students, instead of doing their own work,
ChatGPT.
I've had to get creative in asking essay questions that ChatGPT can't answer, which is a moving target. What it couldn't answer last month, it can do this month. I wish I had the solution. I don't. I get the temptation. People have to learn the fundamentals. I was talking about this earlier today in my class when we were discussing Taoism, because Taoism has a lot to say about the role of technology in our lives. It's very, very skeptical of how much technology should play a role in our lives. And clearly, technology is a tool and it can be a curse. We get addicted to it. There's a place for using technology, and students are going to have to probably need to learn how to use the generative AI. And they might have to need it in the workforce. So there will be places in some courses where it absolutely can and should be utilized. But then we need to reserve a space where we set that aside. I mean, it makes me think about calculators in math classes. If the SAT still exists, I think it does. When I took it, I think there was a part where you could use a calculator and then a part where you weren't allowed. And so I kind of foresee something like that.
AI and no AI?
Yeah, here's an assignment, use AI as much as you want. And then here's part 2, don't use it at all. And maybe we could find some balance.
If you had one message for the people out there, what would it be?
The ancient Greeks said that philosophy begins with wonder. I said philosophy is the love of wisdom, so I would tell people to keep asking the big questions and stay curious.
Stay curious. For the people interested in more information, how can we get a hold of you?
Well, like you guys, I have a YouTube channel, and so you can like and subscribe. Hit that. What is it? Like, follow, and subscribe. It's at Ryan Scherbart YouTube handle, RyanScher, B as in boy, ART, or Ryan Scherbart, Ph.D. On YouTube. I've got my whole Philosophy 60 class on there, all my lectures. I did a sabbatical project. That was my project, which I put all my lectures on YouTube. You can participate with other students because every semester they're interacting with the videos in the chat there and in the comments, in the comment section.
Gotcha.
And so you can kind of be a part of my class, even if you're not taking the class. So I welcome you to join that.
Thank you for coming by here. It was awesome. We'll probably catch up on a part to philosophy thoughts here, but it was very great talking with you, sir.
As you will. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. That was a lot of fun.
You are tuning to Evolve the Earth Talk Show podcast. Like, follow, and subscribe on all platforms at ETE Talk Show. Leave a comment about any subjects you would like us to discuss or questions that we could answer during our show. Shout out to all the mass communication students and staff that participated in this episode's production. Also to our sponsor, Straw Hat Pizza on Industrial in Hayward, California. Thank you, world. Your time is highly appreciated. I am Allan Samson. See you all on the next show.